that's what they use, that's their income, and they trade that for something else. The homes are without refrigeration. There's no running water, no flush toilets, no toilet paper. You mentioned that. There are no mailboxes because there's no rural delivery. If you want mail anywhere in these countries, you have to go to the mail or the post office and get it. And there are no civic clubs and there's no social activity because at night, everybody stays in their house. What was interesting is where the outside the market, there'd be one or two places where they were butchering under the tree. There'd be 2 or 3 men butchering a sheep, and they have 4 more standing there waiting to get butchered. And there'd be 2 or 3 people waiting, and as they butchered the sheep, they put the meat on the tables, and then the people would buy that. There's no refrigeration to keep meat, so you had to get fresh meat. And what was funny was, as they were doing this, and the sheep hanging there and getting butchered, there'd be another sheep here, and the one was going, meh, like me next, me next. He didn't know what was going on. There's an absence of men in the villages, and what happens is they take a bus to the city, and they stay in a factory villa during the week, then they come home on the weekend. And the public buses are very important, but they're really old. And when people get on in the city on a bus, they're long, the back door opens up, it's like a 4 thing opens up, and people get off, and next people get on there. As they're getting on, the bus is packed, everybody outside pushes them on there, and then the doors close behind it. So culture shock is like a steady stream. When they work in the factories, most of the factories are what they call arrears. They're 3 months from being paid. They probably work 3 days a week of the week they're in there. But they can take payment in kind. If they work in a factory that's putting wine together, they can take wine. Cement factories, they're making cement blocks. A lot of them take cement blocks. And then they put them out along the highway and they sell them there. So during the week, the wife is out selling cement blocks and the man's in there working. The objective of these meetings is basically to try to get them to understand that a farmer-owned cooperative is better than a government-owned quota system type thing. One question we got all the time, how much is the bribe in America? That's what we got all the time. And when a meeting would start, they'd be in the administration building. We would get there ahead of time because the meeting started at 10. But at 10 o'clock, there was nobody there. So Igor or any other interpreter would have to go and tell somebody on a corner, and then his job was to go and tell everybody. So in about a half an hour, they all showed up. In one country in Uzbekistan, we did it was sort of a vegetable place where they raised more vegetables than anything else. And they were having a struggle. So we were able to bring in a seed company from Holland to bring in hybrid seeds. And we were able to work with the bankrupt collective to lease as a corner of that big collective that was just falling apart to set up a processing plant. And we did that. But then we're going to elect the directors. And my job was to make sure we get a president, vice president, secretary, you know how it goes. I couldn't get anything going all week, and I was pulling my hair out. Didn't have much to pull, but I was doing. Turned out to be that in that communities, those are Muslim communities, they are more of family oriented. See, it could have been Grandpa's organization going right down to the bottom. So they don't elect anybody. The oldest man in each, there were 10 units. The oldest man in each unit is on the board of directors. And the last day I got there, there was a raw and a going on and a hollering, and they had elected a president and they got a cooperative going. And so they felt real good about that. At the same time as we were doing that, there was a number of women who wanted to start a craft cooperative to sell crafts in the bigger city. And it was pretty easy to do that because women will understand the value of money. And they started this some years ago by bringing in cell phones. And they would bring 10 people together, 10 women, and give them each a cell phone. And they all had to sign, and they had so much time to pay back for the cell phone. Now, along with that, if one of those women would leave, The other 9 would have to pay for her cell phone. So they had this organized pretty well. So it didn't take long to get that going. They understood that you got to pay this money back. Do you have any success stories? We have a few. And we have a Front Lines magazine, that's the U.S. Aid magazine. And in there it talks about, doesn't say any failures. They're all great stories in here. I had one in Kenya where I was asked to figure out what was wrong with a milk cooperative. And their milk was being sent back from the big factory. In 2 o'clock in the morning, the milk truck would drive around the community, and each farmer had like 1 cow, so they had a little pail of milk. And there, I rode along one time, and there would be about 40 women, mostly women, with a little pail of milk. And then the guy on the truck would pour it in the big thing. He'd weigh it, mark down how much they owe him. And then when they got back to the plant, they put it in the cooling tank all together. When they got it cooled to a certain point, they loaded it up in 10-gallon milk cans and went off to the big factory with it. They'd come back with about 20 cans of sour milk. Well, I'm thinking, some of those ladies didn't come in yesterday. They left the milk sitting on the step in the 89, 100-degree weather. So I helped the board of directors determine that they needed to get a training manager in their cooperative to go out and train all these people. And a year later, or 2 years later, there was a write-up in the paper about how they had turned this thing around. They had 1,500 members 2 years before I got there, and they were down to 500. Now it was going back up again. So they were having some success. I had one in Kyrgyzstan. I was asked to start a contractors organization, cooperative. They were building contractors. They gave me a list of 80 names. When I got there, I found out that there weren't 80 names. They had names on there that were not contractors. So we got it down to about 15. And couldn't get anybody to subscribe to the idea of starting a cooperative. And they all asked the same question: how much is the bribe in America? See, they had to get, there's only one employer, and to get a contract to do any kind of construction, they had to go into, I think it was Tashkent, and bid on getting the job. Well, they didn't have any bribe money to get the bid. Second is, we tried to get everybody to work together, but there's no trust. So we had one contractor was going to have us in for having maybe a little bite to eat in the afternoon and show off his place. When we got there, it was locked. He decided he didn't want anybody else to come to see his place. So there are some of those things that happen. If you work in a Muslim country, how many have been in a Muslim country at all? 5 o'clock in the morning, the minaret has a little loudspeaker, mezzanine, or how do you pronounce it, call to worship. And now they got it figured out where they can put a loudspeaker on every building in town. So at 5 o'clock, it's going off. You can't understand it. Well, that's okay, except then the dogs start to bark, and the cats start to meow, and the roosters start to crow, and the turkeys start to gobble, and the donkeys start to bray, and you're up for the day. And half an hour later, it goes off again. And the same thing in the evening. The other thing that happens in Muslim country is that they have prayer time at 10 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon, and they have more than that. So you can't start your meeting till probably 10:30, and they all come in for the meeting. Then we stop to have something to eat at noon. Then at 1:30, they have to break to go for 2 o'clock prayer time. And that's the last you see them. Now, you just have a real problem trying to get things organized to get that working. I didn't hear much about the health care. They're doing a lot of work on health care around the country, these countries, but I didn't get involved in that much. When I left the one assignment in Kyrgyzstan, a Muslim country, we were about 4 hours from Bishkek. And there were 4 of us, and my interpreter was a lady, young lady. And when we were there, she bought something that she's going to give her father. On the way into Bishkek, we were going to stop at this one little village, and she was going to give that to her father. So we stopped. Now, it's not uncommon in these countries for men to relieve themselves along the side of the road. They just do that. It's accepted. Women don't do that. So we came to this village, and we saw the car that her brother had. He had a car, or her father had. So the men all got out and went over by the side of the road, and I noticed that she didn't get out. And pretty soon I saw she got out, jumped, and she ran like crazy, threw this at her, and ran back and got in the car. Because, see, it's not whatever for a woman to be single on the road, but after dark, never be on the road. So she was, doing something really wrong was supposed to be doing. Working with interpreters is kind of interesting. Most of the interpreters are very bright. They're some of the best and brightest out of the universities. And they're very fluent in English. Many have worked with the Peace Corps. Many have traveled to the United States. They all have a big ego. And when I was in Tanzania, I had a lady that was my interpreter. And I was going to explain the different types of cooperatives. So I had them written on a whiteboard. And I found out that if you work with the interpreter right, you go over your material with he or she the night before or that morning. This is what we're going to talk about today. Da-da-da-da. They'll study that. And what I found was she would take on an hour, start right out and go for an hour, nonstop. And it was kind of interesting. Well, anyway, on the board, she started writing in Swahili, a whole bunch of stuff, and it was just covered with it. And then she turned and looked. I'm going to start now. I said, good. You don't know what I'm going to tell them, do you? So I hope that she got it done right. Igor had a question. And he said, the question is, how much is the bribe in America? See, I can't understand what they're saying. I said, well, you know the answer to that. There is none. Tell them something. So he gets out and gives a 5-minute dissertation. I have no idea what he said, but he got more of applause than I'd ever gotten in my life. So they'll help take care of a lot of that. I had one interpreter that I worked with in Kyrgyzstan, and there were 18 different countries on that project. It was really managed by a Swiss organization. And there was an entomologist there from Nepal, and he had plants lined up. Entomologist is one that works with insects. And he had markings on these plants, little things stapled on there. And then he had the farmers coming through with a plaid, and I think they were supposed to determine what that insect was. And I had something I had to give them. So I told my interpreter, get a hold of the entomologist out there and tell him that I got to see him before we go. Sir, he's not an entomologist. Yeah. The guy from Nepal this guy and I didn't get along, by the way. This guy from Nepal is an entomologist, and he's going over that with the farmers, but I need to see him before he goes. He's not an entomologist. So he gets out his little book. Entomologist, one who studies insects. See, he's not studying, he's working. So he's not an entomologist. So these are things you deal with. Well, we also sometimes work with situations where you got the gypsies involved. How many have been around the gypsy population when you wish you hadn't been here? The gypsies will find people that really need help. And they had a war veteran in Moldova. His leg was off. He couldn't walk. So they gave him a place to stay and a place, things to eat. But then in the mornings, they drop him off on a corner in Moldova. And then he'd sit there with the little pan all day long and go home at night. So he was taken care of. That's one of the things they like to do. I was sort of mugged in Albania. They have a pretty good plan. I walked from my little bed and breakfast down to a major 5-star hotel. Every city has a big hotel. In case somebody from another country comes, a dignitary, they got a place they can show off. And on my way down there, the hotel was in, and this guy came up and said, he was crying. Oh, things are so bad. He said, my mother's in the hospital. I don't know what I want to do. Just terrible. You know, I haven't eaten. Oh, I'm hungry. So I said, well, there's a restaurant. Let's go. I'll get some. So we went in a restaurant and sat down. And he was telling me how bad things were. And I said, well, let's do this. Your mother's starving in a hospital. Let's do this. You order a double of this. And then you eat half of it, and you take the other half to your mother. So the food came, and he gone. And I thought, well, that doesn't look quite right. And he was talking a little more and a little more. He says, I have to go. I'll be right back. He had to go to the bathroom. And I got a chill down my spine. Now, this ain't right. Has he got a buddy out there? Because he's got a cell phone. So what happened was I took all the money I could find. I had my passport on my neck. In my billfold, I had some money. I put some in my sock. So when he came back, I had paid the bill. He sat down and he was all excited about something. We were going to go someplace. And I hit him on the shoulder and I said, hey, I got the money for you. It's over at my buddy in the hotel. Let's go. No, we don't go now. Yes, we're going now. Come on. So we got over there, and as we got close to the hotel, in the shade before the lights came, he stopped. He wouldn't go in where the lights were. So I said, okay, I'll be back with the money. So I got in the hotel thinking, I got to get rid of this guy some way. So I took, I think I took a $20 bill. And I went out there and I said, here, you take this. He looked at it and he just blew his top at me. But he wanted money to get out of there. Now I'm in the hotel and I'm thinking, how do I get out of here without him knowing where I'm going? I don't want him to know where I'm staying. So I found, forgot what he called himself, but he was the guy with the hat. He was the guy that got the cabs lined up. And I said, I want an English-speaking cab driver. And I wanted to pull up here in the dark so I can get in the cab, because I'm da-da-da. So they did that, and I got back okay. So there are some of those things that run into. Any questions so far? I got a couple things about the tomorrow part, and then we're going to wind it up. How are we doing on time? Question?
Just wondering what, if you could ever help some of the cultures who didn't have an understanding of some of the things you were teaching. It's a long time to help a person learn something like that.
The USAID works with the governments, and they get their heads together, and it might take a year to put a program together. And once that's done, they spend some time educating the community where we're going to go, what's happening. And then they have an office with about 3 or 4 people in it. So when we come there, they're ready for us, and they're waiting for us. But yeah, there are some places that it would be just impossible to try to make something happen on. Yeah. Any other questions? We got tomorrow. We're going to do something real quick here about tomorrow. We'll do it this way. When I was in the consulting business, we had some strategies. And I converted them to the rock-solid strategies. But before we get to that, if this stays up here, how many are acquainted with Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Well, what's happening is that the former Soviet Union people are going through this. First of all, they've got this so we can understand it, but there's 12,000 books on this, and Maslow's written it, but he's made this so we can understand it. Food, shelter, I mean, even animals do that. We get that far. The people in the former Soviet Union are getting past this, but then they want to get some provisions for the future. They want a future. They want to be accepted. And this is what they're working at. It's the younger generation that's bringing it on. The older people there, if there were 40 families in the community that should have come to our meeting, we'd probably get 20 families. And most of them were the younger ones. Because the older ones have been sitting through the propaganda meetings, and the propaganda meetings to a point where they didn't want any part of any more meetings. Then they want some affection. They want someone to care about them. You know, they want someone to make sure we fit. We're here too. We're human. And they want some self-esteem. They want some recognition. And this is where we try to make them feel that we recognize what you're at. They want some power, and then they want some creative potential. So this is where they're at now. And how are they going to get that done? Well, I'll get this over here. There are 5 strategies. First, you have to find out what you want. You have to get your heads together. What is it you want? Maybe you have a dream or a goal for yourself or your own organization. You have to get excited about it. You have to have a vision. You have to know what you want. You have to be with you night and day. It's something you have to be so consumed with it. Once you get that far along, then you can start to study how do I get there? What's the competition doing? What do I have to do to get there? Who else is doing this? And once you find out what's going on in the business, then you really need to find a mentor. And that's what the Russian or the former Soviet Union people do, and they're using us as mentors to find out what we can do to get it going. And we show them, and it's like we're not giving them a fish, we're teaching them how to fish. And you need to write out a plan. What, when, where, why, and who. And once you've got the plan written out, then you've got something to follow. And then this fits right in with it. And then you have to embrace some changes. What you got to here isn't going to get you there. You're going to have to make some major changes. And this is what the former Soviet Union people are doing. They're making some changes by bringing people in that know what's going on and what's going to make it happen. So that's sort of what we're all about. So that's the yesterday, today, and tomorrow that the U.S. aid is doing in the former Soviet Union. Thank you for coming. Virginia's got some cards over there. If you want any information or anything, make it on the card and leave it. One of the things I didn't mention that should have, in Moldova, one evening we were driving, or actually I was walking, they call it the cinema. And the younger girls that go to the cinema are being recruited into the white slavery business around the world, big time. There's nothing for them to do. There are no jobs. So this looks pretty good. A friend of mine came back through Italy,